Hi friends, thank you for tuning in to the Concussion Coach podcast. I am Bethany Lewis, the Concussion Coach. I'm a neurological occupational therapist and certified life coach, and I specialize in guiding people through their concussion recovery journey. I am passionate about helping people understand their injury, speed up their recovery, and reclaim control over their life post-concussion. The purpose of this podcast is to help increase awareness of concussions and the impact they can have on a person's life, and to bring hope to people who have suffered a concussion and those who love them. I firmly believe that sharing stories and knowledge about concussions will bring important light and understanding to this misunderstood and often invisible injury. The information in this podcast is meant to bring that awareness and hope and is not meant as medical advice. The opinions shared are those of the interviewees and my own. If you are suffering with lingering concussion symptoms, I have created a concussion coaching program specifically for you. I will be your mentor to guide you through your recovery journey, offering help with understanding and managing your symptoms, setting achievable goals, and learning how to manage your own thoughts and nervous system in order to get control over your life again. If this program sounds like something that would help you or someone you love, sign up for a free consultation. In the consultation, you'll get valuable information and resources and gain hope for your future. Sign up for your free consultation at the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Concussion Coach podcast. Before I introduce my guest today, I just wanted to make sure that you know about the free guide that is available on my website. It's the 5 best ways to support your loved one dealing with a concussion. If you have a friend or a family member who is struggling with post-concussion symptoms, or if you're the one struggling and would like your loved one to know more about what you're going through and how they can help, head over to my website, theconcussioncoach.com, and download the free guide. My guest today is Michael Flomenhaft. He joined me a few weeks ago on episode 134. It was a fantastic conversation, and you should absolutely go listen to it. I gave Michael's full bio there, but here's a brief one in case you missed the last one. Michael Flomenhaft is the principal of the Flomenhaft Law Firm PLLC in New York, New York. His practice involves trying cases for victims of traumatic brain injury and severe chronic pain. He is renowned for his vast knowledge of neurosciences encompassing neuroimaging, neuropsychology, neurobiology, and the neuroanatomy of chronic pain related to these subjects. Mr. Flomenhaft serves on the board of advisors for the Center of Neuroscience and Law at Fordham Law School and was a director of neurolaw for the program for imaging and cognitive sciences at Columbia University. He is a graduate of Boston University School of Law and the Trial Lawyers College. Thank you for being back here again. I'm excited to pick your brain again.
Thanks for this opportunity, Bethany.
Absolutely. So I wanted to bring you back so that we could talk about pain some more, but I have a few questions, follow-up questions from the last conversation that we had that I kind of want to touch on first, and then we can get into pain if that's okay. And so one of the things that was brought up that I hadn't even given a whole lot of thought to before is this charge of malingering that people can get faced with. And I would love to hear your thoughts on if you feel like this is a legitimate concern, if people are faking it. I mean, I imagine it does happen, but how frequently do you think it happens, or how can you tell if they're faking? And I just have to say too, that this is even hard for me to ask because the biggest piece of advice that I hear from patients and to give to caregivers is to believe them. There's so much of the concussion experience that doesn't make sense for what we typically associate with concussion or what most people think of. And so it's very validating for people to be believed in their own embodied experience. And so, but this is something that comes up a lot. So what are your thoughts on malingering and how to know if it's actually happening or not?
Well, I think in every single case involving concussion or mild traumatic brain injury, you can, in terms of litigation, you can anticipate there'll be assertions against the plaintiff of malingering, and that'll be developed in various ways and from various vantage points. One of the really important ways to neutralize that is to have adequate brain imaging, because you can't fake pathology in your brain. Mm-hmm. Whether that brain imaging is in the form of specialized MRI, what they call susceptibility weighted imaging, which shows microbleeds, whether it's in the form of serial MRIs, which over time can show atrophy, which wasn't present at the time of the event, whether it's in the form of PET scans or even quantitative electroencephalography, QEEG. I mean, those results cannot be fabricated. So I think that's really important piece in addressing that. And those things often are not incorporated into the lawsuit because, unfortunately, many neurologists are not familiar with the more advanced imaging necessary to depict concussion. mild traumatic brain injury. And it's not part of, and the type of imaging you want, including also volumetric imaging to show changes in brain volume over time, are not sought after by many neurologists or physicians as part of their protocol for evaluating a patient. But those things can't be faked. And so that's an important piece of the puzzle.
Can I ask a quick question on that? If that's not something that's necessarily being prescribed by their physicians, how can people get that? Like, do they have to ask for it and request it themselves, or what's the best way for them to get access to those?
Well, for most of those things, you'll need a prescription. So they'll have to go to their physician and ask them to prescribe it, or find a physician, particularly a neurologist, that is attuned to more sensitive diagnosis of mild traumatic brain injury, and ask them to prescribe it. And more and more facilities that do brain imaging are offering diffusion tensor imaging, which is crucial in the evaluation of mild traumatic brain injury. Because, just to be quick about it, most neurologists are basically concerned with gray matter injury, but from my perspective, concussion is mostly a white matter injury. And so to the extent they're just getting a standard CAT scan or standard MRI, you're basically getting a gray matter visualization, and for something that's a white matter phenomenon. And to the extent that you're getting assurance from those gray matter visualizations, the thing that there's no significant damage, that assurance is meaningless, because they're not visualizing the thing not visualizing the microstructural parts of the brain that really matter. So yeah, you have to push your doctor for that. To the extent you're getting neurofeedback as part of your rehabilitative regimen, that can be the QEEG, quantitative electroencephalography, which supports that, can be performed and obtained without a prescription. So you need to find someone who's skilled in your vicinity that can perform and interpret quantitative electroencephalography, and sometimes that can be hard to find.
And for people who have not had any of these scans or don't have access to it, is there anything that they can be aware of, or that their lawyers can be aware of, to help with that charge of malingering?
Well, let me just say that I think that now there are attorneys throughout the country who have an emphasis in TBI, and they've gone in mild TBI, and they've attended seminars on mild TBI, and so they know about this imaging, and they'll know where this imaging can be obtained. If you can't find your way to that, then if they contact my office, I can find them an attorney in their jurisdiction that can help direct them that way. But so the imaging is one part of the malingering. A malingering antidote to the charges of malingering is a really careful biography or a compilation of biographical information of how that person was before and how they've changed afterwards. Usually the person who has the mild traumatic brain injury may not be able to fully articulate that. Church or some civic organization that knew them before and experienced the change afterwards. Usually the people in your life are themselves the repository of the changes, of the changes in the person. And so that biographical and narrative information is really an essential antidote to the malingering charge. The third thing is that to the extent there's neuropsychological testing, and usually with these cases there is neuropsychological testing, part of that protocol involves what they call validity testing to establish that the deficits that are found are validly generated without exaggeration. And so that's testing the authenticity of a person's deficit. The validity of a person's deficit is part of the neuropsych protocol. And that's not just construed from the validity instruments as well themselves. It's also construed by the pattern of deficits that's shown in the neuropsych testing. So it's really rare from a mild traumatic brain injury for someone to be impaired in every single category. The damage to the brain is very serendipitous. So certain parts are damaged, certain parts are well preserved. Usually intelligence is very well preserved, but certain factors that are necessary to use your intelligence, productively are impaired, whether that be short-term memory or executive function or processing speed. So you expect to see a diversity in result in the neuropsych testing, where you have some fairly well preserved scores, and you have some scores which reflect significant impairment. And particularly if you find impairment in categories of cognition that are necessary for a person to do their job. So for instance, if I'm an air traffic controller, I would expect that person to be very strong in multi-factor thinking, being able to keep a number of things in their head at the same time, like keeping a number of flights in their head at the same time. And so, but if they're impaired that way, that would correspond to the difficulties they would have in going back to work, and will also explain their inability to feel confident that they can do their job productively. Because someone with that type of deficit should not be returning to work. Someone with a deficit in computation should not be returning to work as an accountant. So even if the person's saying that they're lazy, they should be going back to work. I mean, if the defense says that, you wouldn't want someone going back to work with deficits in the categories of thinking that are essential to do that work productively. So that has to be carefully evaluated in terms of the neuropsych results, and the neuropsychologist needs to be really carefully informed as to who that person was beforehand, so he or she can evaluate what was the baseline. I mean, a person can test normal or an average in a score, and that can be interpreted as normal, but average for an air traffic controller means that planes are going to be crashing.
Yeah. Well, and I have a friend who took the neuropsych testing and scored quote unquote normal average, but he felt like it took him twice as long to do it as it normally would have. Like each test, like I guess he ended up scoring within okay ranges, but he felt the difference from it. It exhausted him. He wasn't able to perform it as quickly and clearly as he knew that he would have had he not had the injury. And so without a baseline test to compare it to, it is still a challenge. And so I appreciate you bringing that up, though, like that there is value in those neuropsych tests that if it shows specific areas and bringing up to the, like, as you're talking about them, people not being able to return to work, or it not being advisable for them to return to work if they're having certain deficits, that's again, kind of what we talked to last time. It gets at the core, a lot of times their identity is involved in what they do for work, who they how they can show up. And it's just such a hard thing to figure all of that out. But I appreciate also that you said the intelligence is intact. It's just those factors that allow you to use your intelligence. That's really well said. And I think that is something that can be rehabbed, but in the meantime, they shouldn't be going back to work. So I don't think that it's necessarily always off the table completely down the road, but at least now in recovery and in this situation, we should be encouraging people to step back if that's important for the safety of themselves and other people.
So let me say a few things to that.
Yeah.
About that. So I think that the cognitive therapy and other interventions can rehab deficits and improve deficits, but the question is, can they improve, to follow up on what you said, can they improve the processing speed? Can they improve the speed in which a person is able to perform? Because jobs don't require accuracy; they require accuracy and a certain amount of speed. And since the mild traumatic brain injury, concussion, is a white matter injury primarily, and it's the white matter which provides the connectivity in the brain, because the brain is basically a microprocessor. That one of the hallmarks of mild traumatic brain injury is a decrease in processing speed, and that processing speed can be very difficult to recover. And another consequence of mild traumatic brain injury, which is really almost always overlooked, is subsequent atrophy of the brain, because if the white matter is damaged, the electrical impulses to the gray matter will produce an atrophy in certain parts of the brain over time. And that means the brain has to work so much harder to do the same work, and the fact that it has to do so much harder to do the same work when the intact brain really requires about 65% of the body's energy itself. That, as you said, it can be exhausting to do the work well. So how can you have a job even if you can score well on a neuropsych test if by lunchtime you're exhausted, you can't keep the job. So there are all sorts of cognitive issues that need to be addressed to confront the charge of malingering. And of course, for a lot of mild traumatic brain injury patients, there's a loss of frustration tolerance. There's an impulsivity. And so there are personality issues, which even if they recovered fully, cognitively make them prohibitive occupationally because they can't work with a group anymore. And so they may want to work, but they're not suitable for the workplace because of their personality changes. I mean, so those are other issues that I think factor into the opposition to the malingering charge. Of course, the other thing is that the doctors, neurologists, neuropsychologists for the defense that assert malingering usually have very flawed and incomplete analyses in reaching that conclusion. They'll misinterpret validity tests. They'll overlook scores which contradict their situation. I mean, their analysis. They'll disregard imaging tests. They'll be indifferent to a person's history. I mean, so there's a lot of information to be assembled to combat that. It requires an attorney who's really committed to the validity of your loss and the justice of your claim.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. That's all very well said, and I hope people can find those attorneys. That's yeah, and I appreciate what you're doing to try to help educate people and other attorneys so that we can have more people who understand these things. And we were talking a little bit about imaging. I have a further question about that. I'm wondering if you know of imaging that can let people know when it's okay to return to play if they're an athlete, because as you said, the white matter injuries can take longer to show up, both symptomatically and in imaging. And so how can people know when it's safe is there like a concrete way to be sure that it's okay and safe to return to play for sports?
Okay, so I think when you're asking me a question about a very sensitive subject.
That's true. So
I mean, my feelings about this are very contrary to the conventional wisdom. So like I said before, I think the brain is a multiprocessor. I mean, I don't know if I said that before, but the brain is a multiprocessor. There's 86 billion neurons, which is your gray matter, and they perform your brain activity. And there's the white matter, and there's about 100 trillion connections in that gray matter. And that white matter is very, very delicate and very prone to injury. I mean, the brain is basically 2.5 pounds of jello, and that microstructure can be very, very easily disturbed and disrupted by any sort of concussive force. The reason I'm saying that is since, to me, most concussions, sports or otherwise, are fundamentally white matter injuries, and the protocols, the concussion protocols, from my perspective, are gray matter protocols. So using gray matter protocols for a white matter injury. So yes, an athlete can pass with flying colors a gray matter protocol, a concussion protocol based on a gray matter neurological examination, which is what neurologists administer, and they can have totally normal MRIs and CAT scans, and so the doctor can say, Mrs. Jones, Mr. Jones, I have good news for you. The imaging was normal. Your son can go back and play football. But that's totally without any grasp of what the underlying white matter injury is, and without that grasp, that athlete is at increased vulnerability to disproportionate injury from the next concussion. And what's significant about that is that the concussion protocols are usually contemporaneous with the traumatic event, but the white matter damage, unlike gray matter damage, can take days or weeks or months to fully manifest. So, to me, these concussion clearances, whether based on the neurological examination or based on the imaging, are in the dark, and the guidance they're giving in terms of assurance of athlete safety are facades.
Okay,
Sure,
thank you for
hate what I'm saying right now.
There
I get
there
a lot,
are.
I'll probably get a lot of angry letters from coaches, you know. That's my
No, but it's the science doesn't lie about it. I don't know. I just feel like it is it is very hard though, because it is, again, there's so much more to sports and athletics than just like I don't know. I just, if you had a suggestion, do you have a recommendation based on what your knowledge and of how the neuroscience works, what would be recommended or ideal to protect kids' brains? I'm thinking of kids, but adults too.
well, I think that let me just say one more thing. You know, it's very difficult to discern there's been white matter damage without really careful testing because people with mild traumatic brain injury, as you know, Bethany, I mean, their intelligence is usually very well preserved, or not declines in a way that's really obvious to people. So people look the same, and they're intelligent and they sound the same. So it's very hard for probably even parents to know that their children are okay. And of course, having said everything I had to say, the younger brain has much more resilience. So the younger athlete does have a much greater chance of recovering fully.
Mhm.
And so I think what we're talking about is the severity of the concussion. Well, I'm just saying that you can't that even if an athlete gets clearance, there's no assurance that the clearance is not an assurance that there hasn't been microstructural damage or that the athlete is at increased risk of disproportionate damage if there's a subsequent concussion. So in terms of if you want to avoid that risk, you have to avoid sports which involve that type of trauma. And we're talking about football, we're talking about soccer heading, things like that.
Yeah.
And the effects of that trauma, because there's so much redundancy in the brain, may not show up for 20 or 30 years.
Mm.
You know, and so the athlete could be fine, could seem fine and perform fine for years afterwards, but that may have produced a brain atrophy, which becomes clinically significant years down the road.
Mm. Okay. So protect the
Hope I
heads.
haven't ruined your day.
Yeah, right. Thanks. No, I do. I think it's helpful to put it out there and just if people are aware of the risks, then they can make those informed decisions versus just trusting that, okay, just because they pass this neurological exam, then okay, they're fine all of a sudden. Just knowing, I think it's helpful to be informed.
So if I really wanted to be sure, you know, I want diffusion tensor imaging, I want PET scanning, I want volumetric studies, and if all those, I want QEEG, if all those are really good, then I'd say you're good to go. Because those
Okay.
things would give me much more indication of the status of the white matter.
Hmm.
But to just go by an ordinary CAT scan or an ordinary MRI, to me is no assurance at all. But yeah, there are much more sophisticated much more sophisticated studies that can give the type of assurance athletes deserve.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. I like the way you said that. Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to move us to a different topic here. Well, I mean, it's all the same topic, but more on the side of recovery. So I know that you have mentioned a couple times neurofeedback being very helpful. If there's anything else that you want people to know about neurofeedback and why it helps, I would love to have you talk about that. And then if there are other therapies that you've found to be effective or that you like to suggest people look into, I'd love to have you share that as well.
Well, I just say that I find that most physicians are totally unfamiliar with neurofeedback. But neurofeedback is a way of really identifying electrical abnormalities in the brain and creating challenges, computer challenges in terms of sound, in terms of mental challenges, in terms of visual challenges that help challenge those electrical deficits and permit a leveraging of the brain's neuroplasticity to rehabilitate and improve the brain and reestablish proper electrical functioning in the brain. My understanding is it's used significantly in the United States Armed Forces. Because the United States Armed Forces, given the challenge they had following Iraq with all the blast concussions, really had to pursue in a cutting edge way brain rehabilitation. But neurofeedback has not assimilated into the medical community. A lot of psychologists do it, but to me, I mean, I've seen extraordinary results. I've seen reestablishing connection in the corpus callosum. I mean, there's no limit. I would say there's no limit to how much you can rehabilitate with neurofeedback.
Wow.
The brain has tremendous neuroplasticity potential. It's like it's a very targeted brain gym for your brain. And if you're working with the right therapist, the more you do it, I think the stronger you'll get. And it's not necessarily limited to people that have a deficit or have mild traumatic brain injury. You can leverage your neuroplasticity at any level,
Mm-hmm.
and improve your brain functioning using neurofeedback to get to higher and higher levels. So yeah, I'm a really strong proponent of it.
That's fantastic. Do you know, with a lot of therapies that are working with concussions, with people with concussions, I feel like they have to know concussions specifically to be able to provide the right kind of therapy and to do it well. I'm wondering if with neurofeedback, if you have to find a neurofeedback provider who also really understands concussions, or is the modality itself sufficient to kind of, it will know what it needs to take care of, or it'll automatically take care of those things? Or do you have to have somebody who knows concussions who's also doing the neurofeedback? I don't know if that makes sense.
I think it really helps to have someone know concussions and really be sensitive to the cognitive and emotional challenges that the concussion victim has. Having said that, I mean, the neurofeedback is based on the quantitative electroencephalography, and so that the QEEG profile is telling you the story
Yeah.
of what's going on in the brain and where the deficits are and what has to be targeted for the brain to recover a higher level of functioning. So to me, anyone that's serious about recovering from concussion, if they have the resources for it, needs to incorporate neurofeedback as a core to their recovery.
Okay. It's such a strong recommendation there. It's good to know. I have definitely heard of it before and have heard of people using it, but it's not not usually one of the top things that are recommended when I talk to people. So I appreciate that perspective and how helpful you've found it to be for people. That's awesome. What other therapies? Oh, go ahead.
For me, it is the top.
It is the top. Okay.
Because what can physicians offer you except medications? And then there's cognitive therapy, which can be really helpful in giving you all sorts of exercises to adapt and to compensate for your deficits. But neurofeedback is not a compensatory intervention. It's a way of reestablishing and enhancing brain function.
Yeah. Well, and from in the work that I've done and observed, I've seen people be able to reestablish things as well through, usually it's through intensive programs of multisensory kind of integration. So understanding and using vision, vestibular, different balance, like just all kinds of things put together by therapists who know what they're doing can wake up the brain and help reestablish things and get people healed in a really impressive way as well.
Tell me something. I agree with you, and I was remiss in not acknowledging that. I think cognitive therapists aren't just do compensatory things. They can do all sorts of strategies, interventional strategies that also challenge that neuroplasticity and really leverage that neuroplasticity, and also can really enhance brain function, not just in an adaptive way, but actually in a recovered way. The benefit of neurofeedback is it's so specifically targets the electrical brownouts that are accounting for the deficits that cognitive therapists are working to help.
Cool. Yeah, I could imagine that combination would be extremely powerful. The neurofeedback, in addition to the physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, vision therapy. There's so many other things that combined can be very, very helpful. And yeah, that neurofeedback piece could be, I imagine would increase the success of the other ones as well. I think when we talked before, you mentioned something about occupational therapy. I want to hear your thoughts on OT. Do you remember? I don't remember if that was something that's still on top of mind for you, but I thought that you had mentioned that occupational therapy specifically, or I don't know if there were other ones that you're familiar with.
Well, I've used occupational therapists, neurological occupational therapists in my cases, because occupational therapists have a very specialized focus in in how a person's deficits impact their ability to live their life.
Yeah.
I mean, cognitive therapy. I mean, neuropsychology is discrete and somewhat abstract. They identify all these deficits in different modalities of thinking, but it doesn't get translated into how it impairs the activities of daily living, and how those deficits impede various activities of daily living. And so ultimately that's the issue. How is this concussion affecting your ability to live your life and to function in your life and to be counted on in your life by other people? And so to me, the neurological occupational therapist with that orientation offers a special, very special insight into the consequence of concussion that the physician or the neurologist or the neuropsychologist just are not trained to provide. As I'm saying this, it's occurring to me that, and this is not responsive to your question, but speech therapists understand the brain in certain ways that other specialists don't, and speech therapists can analyze language in a way that offers a window into brain functioning that would totally bypass neuropsychologists and neurologists. And so they can be also really an important adjunct to this analysis of the whole profile of the consequences of concussion, and helping the concussion victim really recover through a grasp of language deficit that can be targeted by the speech pathologist.
Yes. Fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, and I do appreciate that you call out and recognize how OTs are all about function, like how all of these different things play into how a person is able to show up in their life. So thank you for that. And yeah, speech therapy, occupational therapy, these are all very, very helpful and important parts of, I think, helping people in recovery. Okay, I'm going to ask you another kind of random question. These are a lot of disjointed things, but I think it's important to get this information out there. So I am just curious, if somebody were to have an accident that wasn't involving a car accident or a work injury, something like they stood up into a counter and bonked their head, or they accidentally shut the car door or the trunk on themselves or something, like, is there anything that they should know from a legal perspective? Because usually there's not going to be an injury lawsuit, I assume, something like that. So is there anything that they need to be aware of on the legal perspective, or how they can get any compensation for the help that they're going to need from therapies and things like that?
That's a really hard question because it's just too general.
Okay.
I mean, every case, every situation is different. If a person's having an accident which it's not as a result of work or not a result of negligence, then they're really captive to the benefits of their own insurance coverages, right?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's what I figured. I just wasn't sure if there was anything that I wasn't aware of that somebody might be helpful for people to know. But yeah, it makes sense. It just is hard. But okay, thank you.
Insurance coverages are pretty difficult in terms of getting the type of therapies you need to really support people with concussion, under the best of circumstances.
Yeah. Yes. And depends on what country you're in as well. Like probably even what state you're in. There's just so much that goes into it. So yeah, just if you're dealing with that out there, we see you. It's so hard and I'm so sorry. But hopefully this information, just general information and understanding it better, is going to prepare you better to advocate for yourself. So can we talk about pain for a little bit? I know that that's one of your specialties, and I assume I know that you, in your bio, it talks about chronic pain. Are you mostly with the concussion population? Is it headaches, migraines, kind of chronic pain that you're dealing with, or is it all kinds? I'd just love to hear your thoughts on pain. I know you have a lot to say, so I'll just ask questions as they come up, but I'll let you kind of take the lead here.
Well, first of all, when you use the word, when doctors or when you're using the word migraines, they're using the word euphemistically. To a doctor, I see a lot of neurological records. They'll say a patient has migraine headaches, but they aren't migraine headaches at all. They're headaches for reasons having nothing to do with the migraine process. They can be headaches from, lots of times they're headaches from, in my perspective, from very subtle subluxations in the cranial plates from trauma that are impinging upon nerves. And lots of times I've only had insight in terms of appreciating that from osteopaths or craniosacral therapists.
Mm.
It's not within the medical curriculum to understand that type of abnormality. The type of headaches, the type of pain I'm talking about is not necessarily headache pain. Lots of concussion injuries occur in combination with other physical injuries, neck and back injuries, and they could be severe neck and back pain that accompanies the trauma. And chronic pain, from a neuroscience perspective, all pain is a brain phenomenon, and chronic pain has its own special brain consequences. And so chronic pain is atrophic to the brain, just like concussion or brain trauma is atrophic to the brain. And so, if you go to an orthopedist for sciatica, he's looking at it as just a lumbar nerve or low back problem. But if you did brain studies, you'd see that chronic low back pain atrophies the brain. So you have it. So, and you can Google that. See that I'm not. You can Google that. The low back pain, brain atrophy. It's a very robust area of neuroscience, understanding the relationship between different types of pain and different changes in the brain. And so, if you have a brain trauma, and then you have chronic pain, chronic pain is an atrophic factor on the brain that's superimposed upon the brain trauma itself. And it's rarely, that neuroscience is very rarely recognized by physicians. Very few of them are familiar with it, but it was developed. That understanding was inaugurated at Northwestern University School of Medicine around 2013, and so it's not left field science. It's very core established neuroscience, and so I'm very mindful of chronic pain being ultimately having brain consequences. And it also has brain consequences, not just as a result of the fact that pain impulses atrophy the brain, but the medications that are necessary to dampen that pain will also depress cognitive function. So when you're dealing with the evaluation of someone with cognitive deficits, with this combination of factors, you have to consider this combination of factors: pain from the brain trauma, from the mild traumatic brain injury, exacerbated by chronic pain, exacerbated by the medications trying to cope with that. And of course, with severe chronic pain, you're dealing with anti-seizure medications, which, whether it be gabapentin or something else, or Lyrica or something else, which notoriously depress cognitive function.
That's so. There's so oh my gosh, there's so much there, and it just sounds like so much working against the person. I just want to, in case people are curious, what atrophic means.
I'm sorry.
You're good.
So when I say atrophy, when I say atrophic, I mean atrophy. And when I say atrophy, I mean parts of the brain dying.
Mm-hmm.
And so
shrinking of the brain, right?
Shrinking, which is the same thing as brain death, which means the loss of the neurons, the loss of computational and functional capacity inside the brain. And people don't realize that it's a common longer-term consequence of mild traumatic brain injury. Because the mild traumatic brain injury, to the extent it damages white matter, those white matter impulses are decreased to gray matter, and there's a process called Wallerian degeneration, Wallerian, and over time, with a significant group of mild traumatic brain injury patients, they'll suffer Wallerian degeneration, which will atrophy their brain and will accelerate not the entire brain, but certain parts of the brain that are particularly signature for brain trauma, and that accelerates the brain aging in those regions. And your brain is really defines your longevity. I'll just say one more thing that's kind of scary in that regard, and that is that the brain. It's not the brain. When we think of brain injury, we think of its effect on cognition and personality, but the brain also governs the functioning of all the organs. So if the brain declines over time, the organs are going to decline over time. And if the organs decline over time, it's going to, your future physical health and longevity are going to be affected.
Man, it is. I just, when you're hearing all of
So
this, I'm
daunting.
like, it is daunting. And it's like, oh, okay, the quote unquote just a concussion just feels like so ridiculous if you understand what it actually is doing in your brain and the long-term consequences of it. Yeah, it's crazy and it is very daunting. And as you're talking about those white matter connections being disrupted and therefore the gray matter not getting the stimulation, like getting used, it's that whole concept of use it or lose it. So
Exactly.
if you're not using it and it's not that you're not trying, it's just that those connections are disrupted. It just it just is a reminder to me of how important it is for people to take it seriously and to get to do the things that will help you recover, because there are things that can help you recover. But you
Right.
don't want to
That's
just
right.
ignore it and pretend it didn't happen. You need to be doing the neurofeedback, doing the therapies, reestablishing those connections. It is possible,
That's right.
and it's serious. Like, take it seriously.
Yeah. Yeah. It's right. So when I was coming up in this field, that's the phrase I heard. It's just a concussion.
Yes.
It's concussion, but it's not a brain injury. You know,
Yes.
I,
Just,
I hear that I used to hear that all the time. But
mm,
yeah, so I had a really bad concussion. I don't know if I was in a major car accident when I was 16 years old, and and I knew none of these things. So I don't know what I'd be if I hadn't had that concussion.
mm,
But the, but what I've learned echoes everything you're saying, Bethany, and that it's to the extent you can be resourceful and aggressive about your own recovery, there's so much at stake.
yeah. Yeah. Is there anything you want to share from your personal experience with concussion? If anything more that would be
Only,
helpful for
only,
people to
only,
hear?
only that I can that I mean, I understand what it means to have. I mean, I was in a car that got hit at 60 miles per hour
Mm,
when I was 16 years old, and it took me. My head felt like it was shaking inside. My brain felt like it was shaking inside for about a year.
geez.
At that time, I saw neurologists, but they knew nothing about concussion. They had nothing to offer me. Fortunately, I was young enough at 16, so my brain had resilience for me to recover.
Mhm.
I'll just say one thing in that regard. I mean, so last time you'll hear the idea. Well, almost all people recover from concussion within 3 months. I don't know if you've heard that, or within a few months, but that statistic is skewed by the fact that almost all concussions are involve younger people. But if you're not in
Mm,
that age cohort, if you're in your 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s, you don't have that resilience, and it's a significant concussion within seconds can transport, if not condemn, the whole arc of the rest of your life and your family's life.
yeah. Yeah. It is so serious. Thank you. And can you share more about, I'm curious about the chronic pain piece of this. If that's, are there in the legal side of things, is there a way that it can be objectively demonstrated or proven?
That's a whole different. That's a whole different area.
Mm.
It's a whole different. That's another. That's a whole different podcast.
Okay.
No.
Well, maybe I'll bring you back then, if
Right.
that's okay. We could do it again sometime. But okay, that's a whole area in and of
Yeah.
itself.
Right.
Is there anything that you want us as our listeners to know about headaches in particular as they relate to concussion, or what can be done, or how we know that it impacts the future of the brain as well, but in the meantime, while they're dealing with it, and how can people work to deal with that?
Only that the extent you're suffering from intractable headaches, which not have been alleviated by your consultation with your physicians, that you seek out other specialists. You seek out osteopaths who have much more of a structural orientation, or craniosacral specialists if they're in your region, who are much more tuned to integrity of the cranial bones, which can very easily be shifted by millimeters in let's say a whiplash accident. And with the millimeter shift can be very significant in terms of its potential to impinge on nerves and cause chronic pain.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. So yeah, seeking out professionals who can do things other than just prescribe medications. Not that medications are not, I'm not trying to this on medications, they can be very, very helpful. But addressing the underlying problems as well is important and helpful.
I'm just saying that medicine has its role, but it's not exhaustive. And there are there are various specialists, whether it be occupational therapists, speech therapists, cognitive therapists, osteopaths, chiropractors, um, um, all different types of specialists, which have very, very subspecialized understandings, which can offer you insights that can really make very important differences in your recovery.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I want to bring in the whole like mindfulness aspect too. There's the mental and emotional piece and of dealing with chronic pain as well and recovering. So anyway, yeah, I appreciate you bringing all of that up. Anything else that you want to make sure that people hear and understand about pain that is within the confines of this conversation? It sounds like we could have a whole other conversation of other things, but anything that you think people should be aware of?
Pain is such a big discussion, but I think that I just think it's very, very important to be very proactive in finding what's causing your pain and doing what's necessary to alleviate your pain. Because pain is not just a feeling. Pain is to me a toxic chemical event that has deteriorating effects on your, not just your brain, but on your hormonal system, on your whole body. The stress of pain is so corrosive, and so it's very important to be proactive in trying to understand where that pain is coming from. And sometimes it could take a number of consultations from different specialists, to get insight into that and get insight into a pathway to partial or full relief.
Mm-hmm. And I think again the reality, like the seriousness of it, I think is important for people to know. And I think of the person who's listening to this who's like, I am in so much pain and I've tried everything. Like what more can I try? I guess I don't know. It is important to take it seriously, and there are things that can be helpful, and don't give up, I guess. Is that the message?
Well, I'm just being really quick because I know we're treading on a whole big subject. There are different types of pain. One of the reasons why it's important to really interrupt pain as early as you can is that chronic pain changes the cells in the spinal cord in the brain, and which converts pain of one type into pain of another type. And the more chronic pain involves pain that occurs not from the injury itself, but from a dysregulation in the nervous system, which makes the nervous system an engine of pain, and that makes the pain much more intractable. But this is a whole another podcast.
Okay. So stay tuned, guys. There will be more on this, but yes, I do want to offer that hope. I'm curious, actually, just wondering, does neurofeedback help with pain?
I don't. There may be practitioners that use it for pain. I think that theoretically, I think it could. I mean, you have the example of yogis that can walk on fire and walk on nails and not feel any pain, and so they've trained their frontal lobe to suppress the registration of that pain. So I think theoretically, neurofeedback could be a very significant intervention for pain. I haven't checked it out, but if I had chronic pain, I'd look for neurofeedback strategies to deal with that issue, because ultimately pain is in the brain. That's why they give you general anesthesia, to shut down the experience of pain. So yeah, I think neurofeedback is an important strategy for pain relief. But I don't know practitioners that specialize in that.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. That's something to look into.
Great question.
Okay. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for letting me pick your brain some more. This was actually, I learned a lot, and I hope that the people who listen will get a lot from this and just have at least an understanding of what an amazing thing our brain is and how important it is to take care of it. So thank you so much for being here again. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
I'm so glad you listened in today. I hope you have gained some helpful insights and inspiration regarding dealing with and recovering from concussions. My goal is to create more awareness and education about concussions and the fact that there is so much that can be done to improve life after someone has had one. Help me spread the message by liking, commenting, rating, and subscribing to this podcast, and share it with others who would benefit from hearing it. There are more resources available on my website. And again, if you or someone you love would benefit from concussion coaching, sign up for a free consultation using the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Thank you. See you next time, and take good care of that amazing brain of yours.